fact-oriented, the number crunchers. Builders focus on what they see, hear, touch, taste, and smell. They live in a universe of concrete reality. They are comfortable in clear-cut situations where the details are known and proven. Hence, builders collect facts, lots of facts. And unlike the other types, they can remember these details without putting them into a broader contextual picture. So builders are likely to be particularly good at games of trivia. Not only do builders like facts, they base their decisions on them. They tend to be quite literal, as well as suspicious of theories, inferences, and conjecture, and uncomfortable with ambiguity. So if you want to impress a builder on a date or in the office, don't give him or her your big ideas. Stick to details, precise information. I should have remembered this advice when I was interviewed recently in Kansas City. A journalist had taken me to a funky coffee house near her newspaper's headquarters. We settled on a couch, and she began asking questions about the 4 personality types. Her queries were concrete and precise. That was fine. But I began to use the data to paint a larger picture, laced with theories. She became testy, which unnerved me. True to my explorer self, I then became more and more theoretical, trying to win her over with what I regarded as exciting ideas. This proved to be a huge mistake, as I found out when I read her caustic review of my work a couple weeks later. Builders want established facts. Theories leave them cold. Perhaps builders' concrete, factual disposition contributes to their superb ability with numbers. Elevating the activity of serotonin in the brain actually inhibits general creativity and reduces the impulse to explore. But individuals with a specific genetic variant in the serotonin system have higher scores on figural and numeric creativity. In fact, builders handle detailed columns of figures with dispatch, in all likelihood because numbers are concrete, precise, and orderly, the gifts of serotonin. Managerial genius. Not surprisingly, builders make good managers and administrators. They follow the rules, stick to the facts, and pay attention to the details. They are reliable, persistent, and conscientious, and they reach out to those around them, building and maintaining their social ties. This managerial savvy is yet another trait associated with serotonin. People who take serotonin boosters become more cooperative during group tasks. They make more suggestions, deliver fewer demands, and make fewer attempts to solve problems by themselves. George Washington was a meticulous plantation manager. He got up at dawn to ride around the perimeter of Mount Vernon, then often returned to read agricultural manuals, committing long sections to memory. He supervised his carpenters, blacksmiths, coopers, weavers, shoemakers, seamstresses, millers, fishermen, and livestock. He even supervised the making of cider into Applejack and the repairs on his freight sloop that plied the Potomac. And he wasted nothing. As one of his biographers, James Flexner, wrote of him, with his unbounding energy and his gift for detail, Washington was at Mount Vernon an efficient commander-in-chief. Guardians of Tradition. Poet Rainer Maria Rilke called our attachment to traditions the gnarled fidelity of old habit. Builders like old habits. They are traditional. My personality type study confirmed this. Only builders heartily agreed with this statement. My friends and family would say I have traditional values. Builders also have a strong favorable response to the statement, long-established customs need to be respected and preserved. Builders remember anniversaries. They enjoy business picnics, holiday parties, and seasonal hunting, fishing, skiing, or sun-worshipping vacations with friends. I suspect these men and women also predominate in summer colonies where old friends gather annually. Historic continuity with the past is not a duty, it is only a necessity, wrote American jurist Oliver Wendell Holmes, Jr. Builders agree. Rituals, ceremonies, and traditions appeal to them enormously. Plato called this personality type the guardians, the preservers of tradition, custom, and community. And they certainly expressed their conservative values in my personality type study. When asked whether they were ultra-conservative, conservative, liberal, very liberal, or other, builders were significantly more politically conservative than the other types. Moreover, when asked where they wanted to live, builders chose the suburbs or the country. No wonder so many Midwestern Americans tend to be politically conservative. These states are full of builders. Scientists have long held that your political orientation comes, at least in part, from your inherited biology. This, apparently, is true. Indeed, this trait, observing social norms, has even been associated with specific genes in the serotonin system. In fact, Americans of all kinds enhance their affection for tradition during holidays by boosting levels of serotonin with food. Take Thanksgiving. In the United States, most people celebrate Thanksgiving with a family dinner, and the core of the meal is usually turkey, a fowl loaded with L-tryptophan, an amino acid that is sucked into the bloodstream and hustled to the raphe nucleus in the brain, where it is converted into serotonin. So as we dine with kin, we feast on food that makes us feel good about custom and tradition. Rice, pasta, bread, cereal. Under stress, many turn to the heavy starches, comfort food. People say these ordinary delights remind them of their childhood and home. They probably do, because these foods also boost serotonin, triggering feelings of calm, familiarity, and tradition. In fact, the ancient Greeks worshipped grain through Demeter, their goddess of the harvest. Most of the Greek and Roman gods were capricious, jealous, quarrelsome, or troublemakers, but Demeter was responsible, dependable, protective, and giving. Her divine power, the Greeks believed, brought forth the fields of grain. So they worshipped Demeter in the autumn, not with bloody sacrifices, but with gentle prayers as they shared their first loaves of harvest bread, thereby elevating serotonin activity. Cautious but not fearful. My friend Fred calls himself the low-risk type. We make quite a pair as we cross the streets in New York City. I don't actually weave around the moving cars, but I don't necessarily stop walking at red lights either. Like many New Yorkers, I have developed a sense of how much time I have before becoming roadkill. Fred stands rooted to the sidewalk until the light turns green. Indeed, Fred steps back at least 2 paces from the curb when the light turns yellow. Fred is prudent, another builder trait. In my personality type study, builders were far more likely to respond enthusiastically to the statement, "I tend to be cautious, but not fearful." This caution is to be expected. Several genes in the serotonin system have been associated with harm avoidance, and men and women with specific combinations of these genes are known to be cautious but not fearful. Where dopamine triggers exploration, serotonin puts on the brakes. One doesn't think of the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army, the man who led the United States to independence, as cautious, but Washington was. His first aide-de-camp, Joseph Reed, described Washington as he was trying to make a difficult decision. He hesitated, more than I thought the public service permitted. Prudent men and women are not necessarily averse to risk. They simply take particular comfort in the familiar. Builders seek security the way explorers seek novelty, directors seek achievement, and negotiators seek harmony. What better guardian could Americans have hoped for than the thoughtful, cautious, high serotonin George Washington? Conscientiousness. All these builder traits add up to something special. Conscientiousness. This splendid human attribute is a combination of several related characteristics. Psychologist Marvin Zuckerman believes that conscientiousness is composed of 2 basic traits, dutifulness, or the degree to which people follow strict standards of conduct, and deliberation, the degree to which they plan and express caution and thoughtfulness. Other scholars have added more traits regarding conscientious people as cautious, prepared, methodical, fastidious, compulsive, persistent, self-disciplined, thorough, orderly, dependable, dutiful, civic-minded, and ethically principled. Conscientious people, they say, have a deep sense of duty, and they make plans, follow schedules, and adhere to social norms. The Myers-Briggs personality test adds that these men and women want to do things in an accepted way and support the established methods. They prefer to plan things far in advance and know ahead of time what they're doing. They like words like scheduled, orderly, systematic, and organized. These men and women would rather build than invent, and prefer to be sensible instead of fascinating. They seek certainty and order. They want to have both feet on the ground. As I've mentioned, many of these subcategories of conscientiousness have been linked with specific serotonin activity. So it is not surprising that many builders adopt a work ethic early in life. My niece Piper started working her newspaper route when she was 7, using her red wagon to cart the papers through the back streets of Aspen, Colorado, and hurling them at people's front doors. Builders are conscientious and community-oriented. They often help around the house, volunteer at their place of worship or in their neighborhood, and do thankless tasks in the office, in their town or city, for their country or for the world, often with a selfless, stoical, charitable attitude. Washington vividly summed up the cost of this trait, too, saying to his staff, "Gentlemen, you will permit me to put on my spectacles, for I've not only grown gray, but almost blind in the service of my countrymen." Builders serve. Calm, social, and beneficent. Builders are also social. In my personality type study, builders were significantly more likely than other types to describe their friends as a social crowd. Washington was endlessly social. He and his wife Martha entertained some 2,000 guests between 1768 and 1775, harboring kin, friends, colleagues, and just about any stranger who wandered past Mount Vernon at nightfall. If his dining room was empty of family, friends, or passers-by, Washington regarded it as lonesome. Not all builders are social, of course, but certain genes in the serotonin system do contribute to sociability. Men and women with these genes have more close friends. Even very shy people who take antidepressants that elevate serotonin activity in the brain and bloodstream become more gregarious. Serotonin also makes you calm. This is a primary reason why people take serotonin boosters like Prozac and Paxil, to feel serene. Picture those popular boys and girls in high school who appeared so affable, calm, and self-confident. They probably had particularly high activity in their serotonin system. Perhaps this desire for relaxed self-confidence is what attracts some people to psychedelic drugs. MDMA, known as ecstasy, as well as the related hallucinogens, LSD, DMT, and psilocybin, trigger a gigantic surge in the entire serotonin system, giving you feelings of intense well-being and comfort, as well as tactile sensitivity and bizarre perceptual effects. Ecstasy also releases dopamine and norepinephrine, but the serotonin surge produces the sociability and self-confidence, while dopamine triggers the euphoria. Along with calm and friendliness, builders often display beneficence. Washington, again, was a supreme example. In one of the great moments of American history, he turned down the offer to become America's first king. As Flexner wrote of Washington, "In all history, few men who possessed unassailable power have used that power so gently and self-effacingly, for what their best instincts told them was the welfare of their neighbors and all mankind." High status, belonging. Washington would have been pleased to read Flexner's admiring words. Like many builders, he was often worried about his reputation. To builders, appearances matter. They take to heart these lines from William Shakespeare: "For the eye sees not itself, but by reflection." Builders want to belong, to be regarded as reliable, respectable, and charitable, to be members in good standing. They depend on their social networks for their emotional well-being, and they can be crushed by personal criticism. So they strive to maintain their ties, meet their responsibilities, and behave with decorum. In fact, builders are willing to endure tremendous personal sacrifice to remain embedded in the social hierarchy or even reach the top. Their energies generally pay off, too. Individuals with specific genes in the serotonin system generally achieve higher socioeconomic status. They also tend to live in more affluent neighborhoods. Moreover, builders are proud of their accomplishments, displaying their medals trophies, diplomas, and certificates, and showing photos of themselves with family members, influential citizens, or well-known politicians. This correlation between serotonin and social success has been found in a wide range of other species. When given antidepressants that boost serotonin activity, vervet monkeys also climb the social ladder. Alpha males of the community have about twice the serotonin levels in their brain and blood as their subordinates. Even socially dominant lobsters have higher levels of serotonin. So, whether you're a human, monkey, or lobster, if you have more serotonin activity, you are more likely to join, even reign, in the establishment. Religiosity and the biology of ought. You might expect that people who respect authority, follow the rules, believe in loyalty and tradition, and work in the establishment would also be religious. Not necessarily. I know more than one atheistic builder. My friend Bob, for example, is calm, social, popular, conscientious, superb with numbers, and traditional in many ways. But a more ardent atheist you will never meet, even though he grew up as a Mormon. Still, studies of identical and fraternal twins indicate that religiosity does have a genetic component, and people with serotonin activity in certain brain areas, including the raphe nucleus where serotonin is produced, tend to exhibit self-transcendence, or religiosity. Religiosity has also been associated with other aspects of the serotonin system. So variability in these serotonin pathways may explain why some people express more religious fervor than others. It also explains why builders in my personality type study were far more likely than other types to be part of an organized religion. And no wonder psychedelic drugs, including ecstasy, LSD, psilocybin, and mescaline, often trigger feelings of spiritual awareness, mystical enlightenment, and religious ecstasy. As I mentioned, these drugs dramatically elevate serotonin activity in many brain regions. Probably related to builders' religiosity is their need to do what is right. Builders can be beleaguered by their conscience, what Darwin called that short but imperious word, ought. Ought, should, must, proper, right, wrong. These words tend to alienate the freedom-loving explorer, pragmatic director, and compassionate negotiator, but builders are comfortable with them. Indeed, in my word type study, builders were particularly fond of the words moral, morals, and values. And when asked to respond to the statement people should behave in ways that are morally correct, only builders in my personality type study overwhelmingly agreed. Oprah Winfrey would probably agree with that statement too. I suspect that Oprah is primarily a negotiator. She has some builder in her too, as the following remark suggests. When she announced her support for Barack Obama for president in 2008, she said, "I know him well enough to believe in his moral authority, and that is the number one reason I am supporting him." On the dark side, negative traits of the builder. Everyone is a moon and has a dark side which he never shows to anybody, wrote Mark Twain. We often try to hide our weaknesses and quirks of personality, even from ourselves. But inevitably our faults reveal themselves, and just about every human asset can become a liability. Builders, for example, often have a right way of doing things. But some believe their way is the only way, becoming dogmatic, closed-minded, and stubborn. I know a young couple like this. Both are builders. As she says, "We can't do household chores together. Last week we fought over how to lay down a carpet, and yesterday we had a raging battle over how to cook a turkey." Emotional rigidity is linked with serotonin, and because builders are committed to rules, schedules, and traditions, they can bicker about a lot of little daily issues. Builders are realistic and cautious, often fine qualities. But these traits can metamorphose into deep pessimism, a trait linked with serotonin pathways. Their pessimism can turn to fatalism, too. Some builders, for example, maintain that nothing will ever change for the better. A related trait, perhaps, is the builder's stoicism, also associated with serotonin. This trait can be admirable, but it can evolve into one of two extremes: self-loathing or feelings of moral superiority. The builder either fails to see any of his or her merits, or puffs and preens with sanctimonious self-satisfaction while passing moral judgment on others. Builders are also frugal, yet another trait linked with serotonin. In some, this can turn to stinginess, and because builders are literal, fact-oriented, and have a show-me attitude, they can fail to appreciate the emotional subtleties of a person or miss the nuances of a social, economic, or political situation. Builders can also become fixated on the past. As a builder girlfriend of mine said recently, "I can daydream for hours about what life would have been like if I had bought another house instead of the one that I bought, or what life would be like if I had married my old boyfriend instead of my current husband, or how I could have gotten better grades in school or made more money. I really live my life with regret." If explorers live for today and negotiators live for tomorrow, builders can wallow in their thoughts of yesterday. Perhaps most dangerous is the builder's loyalty and respect for authority. These traits are often admirable, but not always. Take General Colin Powell of the United States Army. Powell is a builder. He is known worldwide for his competence, reliability, decency, and loyalty. Yet Powell's sense of loyalty may have helped lead the United States into war with Iraq, despite his conviction that this was monumentally unwise. Many people believe he tipped America toward war when, on February 5, 2003, he appeared before the United Nations and maintained that the Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction. Before his speech, 2/3 of Americans were against the war. Afterward, half were in favor of invasion. Powell had been deceived into believing that Hussein was building bombs, but he chose to support President George W. Bush's solution: attack. In a similar situation in the past, he had explained his actions by saying, "I had done what my conscience and duty required." Due, I believe, to his disposition to respect authority and follow orders, Colin Powell contributed to chaos in the Middle East. Possible physical problems. Scientists report the specific genes that increase activity in parts of the serotonin system also inhibit task switching. In other words, these people have difficulty stopping what they are doing. So perhaps the serotonin system plays a role in a peculiar behavior pattern: hoarding. I have a physician friend who hoarded for years. Her house was so filled with stuff that she could no longer sleep in her bedroom or eat at her dining room table, until she began to take an antidepressant that triggers dopamine activity, thereby suppressing serotonin. Hoarding is a complex addiction, but I suspect it may stem, at least in part, from the biological font of persistence: serotonin. Builders, the pillars of society. American financier Robert Morris wrote to George Washington, "Heaven has blessed you with a firmness of mind, steadiness of countenance, and patience in suffering that give you infinite advantages over other men." Builders, like Washington, have many strengths. They tend to be calm, modest, and self-effacing, as well as affable and socially skilled. Builders are hard-headed. They have a clear memory for yesterday's mistakes, so they prepare. They are steady, reliable, cooperative, industrious, hard-working, and patient. They are dedicated to family and community, and builders work diligently to preserve traditions and standards. They are often fine protectors and providers. Thanks to the persistence of human biology, little has changed since Plato called these men and women guardians some 2,500 years ago. Builders are still the pillars of society. Chapter 6. Only he who keeps his eyes fixed on the far horizon will find his right road. Dag Hammarskjöld. Always to the stars. the director. In a jar, in a cider box, under the beer cooler in his office, pathologist Thomas Harvey tucked Albert Einstein's brain. Harvey had begun to perform scientific studies on this brain soon after Einstein died in 1955, taking photos, measuring it, and cutting it into 240 pieces. But he published nothing. Finally, in 1996, Harvey sent a one-sentence fax to neuroscientist Sandra Whittleson of McMaster University in Ontario. Would she like to study Einstein's brain? Soon Whittleson began to compare 50 pieces of Einstein's brain with those of 91 other deceased men and women, including singers, architects, and blue-collar workers. To her astonishment, she found that Einstein's inferior parietal lobes, regions behind the ear where we process mathematical problems and visualize three-dimensional spatial relations, were some 15% wider than normal. Moreover, the deep groove that runs through this region, the Sylvian fissure, was largely pushed aside. This may explain why Einstein's mother had worried that her infant son was retarded. At birth, his head was enlarged and oddly shaped on the sides. But this unusual brain architecture must have enabled nerve cells in these brain regions to work together more efficiently. Indeed, with his unique mental equipment, Einstein would change our understanding of the universe. Albert Einstein was a classic director. These men and women speak their mind. They are direct, tough-minded, and decisive. Yet before they make a decision, they examine their choices thoroughly and unemotionally. Directors admire self-control. They are analytical, skeptical, and exacting. Directors are independent, too, and they must achieve. Indeed, they enjoy competing to get to the top. Therefore, many are pragmatic, focused, and daring. Directors can also be inventive, as well as mechanically and mathematically skilled. Oddly, many are musical, particularly adept at understanding the structure of music. Others are highly skilled at spatial games, from football to chess. And many directors have a heroic side. They are the men and women who dash into a burning building to save a stranger. Directors compose 16% of the sample in my personality type study. Of these directors, 24% were men and 9% were women. A dramatic difference. I was pleased with this breakdown by gender. It indicates that the traits of the director are associated with the male hormone testosterone. Both sexes produce testosterone, but most men produce far more. I know many female directors, of course, among them Kathy. Kathy has smooth, pink-white skin, huge blue eyes, a bouncy blonde ponytail, a high, soft voice, and all of the other appealing traits of a vibrant, seductive young woman. But beneath her beguiling exterior, Kathy has a keen mind, ambitious spirit, and exacting attitude of a true director. Most important, like Einstein and other directors, Kathy excels at what scientists call systemizing. Systemizing. Psychologist Simon Baron-Cohen distinguishes two gender differences in patterns of thinking, which he refers to as systemizing and empathizing. Systemizing is the propensity to construct and analyze systems, from building bridges or fixing motorcycles to studying the ecology of a pond. Empathizing is the ability to identify with and respond appropriately to another's thoughts and feelings. Empathetic people are intuitive and compassionate. Baron-Cohen further maintains that systemizers express more testosterone and are largely men, while empathizers express more estrogen and are more often women. But as he says, some men and women are equally proficient at both empathizing and systemizing, and some women excel at systemizing, while some men excel at empathizing. This is exactly what I found when analyzing the results of my personality type study. When responding to the statement, "I understand complex machines easily," directors agreed far more than other types. These people also responded dramatically to the statements, "I like to figure out how things work," and "I am intrigued by rules and patterns that govern systems." More directors were systemizers, and more directors were men. Whether it's understanding computers, automobiles, or electronics, the habits of wolves, logic, math, or music, voting patterns, or the physics of your tennis swing, If you are skilled at understanding rule-based systems, you have a core trait of the director. Einstein was a supreme systemizer. His mission to dissect the systems that govern the universe first emerged in 1895 when, at age 16, he began to think about riding beside a beam of light. As he later wrote, I became more and more convinced that nature could be understood as a relatively simple mathematical structure. Testosterone priming, finger talk. Systemizing is linked with testosterone, and it's a skill you begin to acquire before you leave the womb. As testosterone washes over the fetal brain, it builds the brain architecture for this systemizing ability. Meanwhile, surges of fetal estrogen begin to construct the brain anatomy for empathizing. Levels of both fetal testosterone and fetal estrogen swell and recede in patterns that are inherited. So, depending on the hand you're dealt, you will express predominantly more testosterone, predominantly more estrogen, or a lot or a little of both, predisposing you to be better at systemizing, at empathizing, or good or bad at both. Testosterone leaves its mark in many ways. Take a look at your right hand, palm up. The more testosterone you're exposed to in the womb, the longer your fourth or ring finger will be in relation to your second or pointing finger. If you are exposed to more estrogen, these two fingers will be the same length, or your pointing finger will be longer than your ring finger. Once again, this is exactly what my personality type study showed. Directors tended to have a longer ring finger, while negotiators had a ring finger that was the same length as, or shorter than, their index finger. Bill Gates must be a director. I recently watched him give a speech at a conference. His image was broadcast on a huge screen in the center of the stage, and periodically he held up his hand to accentuate a point. Everybody else in the audience was focused on his words. I was fixated on his right hand. Finally, he held it high and steady, just long enough. Indeed, his ring finger was considerably longer than his pointing finger, as one would expect of a world-class systemizer. Not all adult directors receive this surge of testosterone in the womb. So if you are a director and don't have a longer fourth finger, it simply means that you were flooded with testosterone at a later time in life, most likely at puberty. One way or another, testosterone primes directors to systemize, as well as excel at many other things. Spatial skills. According to his sister Maya, Einstein could construct a 14-story house of cards while still a toddler. Testosterone has long been associated with superb spatial skills in both sexes, although most of the studies have been done on males. Nevertheless, these data provide some fascinating insights into this trait of directors, both men and women. Most one-day-old boys look longer than girls at mechanical and moving objects. Infant boys are better than most infant girls at tracking a blinking light across a TV monitor. Boys like toy cars, blocks, trains, and mechanical things they can construct and move around. Boys pack the video arcades to zap electronic enemies in spatial games. And when testosterone inundates the male brain at puberty, boys in many cultures begin to outstrip most girls in math, geometry, mechanical drawing, mechanical reasoning, and engineering. Data from my personality type studies show that far more directors are physicians, mechanics, and engineers. Fetal testosterone builds this spatial prowess in an ingenious way. Spatial talents lie largely in the right hemisphere of the brain. As fetal testosterone surges, it builds the right hemisphere faster than the left, compromising the left hemisphere and endowing the individual with superior spatial skills. Keep in mind, though, that bodily levels of testosterone can be enhanced by puberty and other experiences, thus contributing to your spatial dexterity. For example, women are better at finding their cars in a parking lot around menstruation when estrogen levels decline, enabling testosterone to express itself. The correlation between testosterone and spatial aptitude is not simple. Too much or too little of this powerful chemical can dampen your spatial prowess, and your daily habits and environment always play a role. But the link between spatial skills and testosterone is strong. Musical and athletic ability. This spatial aptitude gives many directors an unexpected gift, musical talent. I love music of all kinds, but when I listen, I just swing to the beat. Directors also notice the composition of the music, the structural arrangement of the notes, and some directors are brilliant at composing and playing it as well. Central to understanding advanced musical composition is spatial talent, and testosterone priming in the womb contributes to this ability. How curious! Why would fetal testosterone produce musical ability? Darwin puzzled over the evolutionary origins and purpose of music. He finally concluded that, like birdsong, musical tones and rhythm were used by our half-human ancestors during the season of courtship. Current data support Darwin's hypothesis. Men are 10 times more likely than women to produce a jazz, rock, or classical music album, and they produce their music at the average age of 30, the height of a man's reproductive years. Most telling, male musicians tend to have longer ring fingers, which is associated not only with elevated levels of fetal testosterone, but also with a higher sperm count. Millions of years ago, director types must have advertised their reproductive vigor with song. Men who receive more testosterone in the womb also excel at a number of sports, particularly sports that require spatial skills, such as soccer. And women around the world flock to admire these high testosterone athletic men. But a lot of director men and women use their musical or athletic talent for other purposes. Einstein used his musical ability to think. His mother gave him a violin when he was 5, and he loved music all his life, particularly pieces by Mozart. Neighbors often heard him playing his violin in his kitchen late at night, as he struggled with some aspect of his theory of general relativity. One recalled, "Then suddenly, in the middle of playing, he would announce excitedly, 'I've got it!'" Focus. Chance favors the prepared mind, wrote Louis Pasteur. Directors believe it. Directors are goal-oriented, so they tend to focus intensely as they work. But unlike explorers who focus on a wide range of interests, directors concentrate narrowly and deeply with the help of testosterone. Fetal testosterone compartmentalizes the brain. In effect, it builds more short nerve cables that connect nearby parts, but fewer long-range cables connecting distant brain regions. This brain wiring enables the systemizing director to focus narrowly and thus pay careful attention to the system's parts without being distracted by unnecessary data. Testosterone injection in adulthood can also affect one's focus, as transgenders report. After 3 months of testosterone shots for a sex change from female to male, one individual said she became more blinkered and changed in mental focus from broad to narrow. Perhaps this is why directors tend to be nitpickers and hair-splitters. They are often focusing on a system's parts rather than on the whole. Perhaps this focus also drives directors to concoct and relish puns and paradoxes. These groan-producing forms of humor structurally juxtapose disparate ideas. The director's focus can be wonderful, especially when it's centered on you. But it can be unsettling, too. Just ask a director who is reading or watching television a simple question. The director probably won't hear or see you. In fact, I've wondered if a director in my life would actually notice if I rode past him through his living room on a rhinoceros, or started eating pages out of his dictionary while he read nearby. Analytical, logical, and direct. Directors pride themselves on being logical. In my personality study, only directors overwhelmingly agreed with the statement, "I am more analytical and logical than most people." Einstein would have been among them. As a boy of 12, he later recalled, I was thrilled to see that it was possible to find out truth by reasoning alone, without the help of any outside experience. Indeed, Einstein worked in later years to develop his own son's analytical skills. As he wrote, "I want mainly to teach him to think, judge, and appreciate things objectively." A spin-off of the director's unusually logical and focused mind seems to be a penchant to be outspoken and blunt, as I discovered in my personality type study. Only directors were highly enthusiastic about the statement, "I like to avoid the nuances and say exactly what I mean." They also stood out in their positive response to the statement, "I think it is important to be direct." Indeed, men and women who express high testosterone activity are less likely to strive to be polite, respectful, considerate, or friendly. As Einstein once said, he had a hard time keeping my big mouth shut. Like Einstein, many directors are abysmal at meandering social chit-chat, wasting words, repeating the obvious. It all seems pointless to them. Directors like to dispense with what they regard as extraneous facts and focus on the goal. These are the people who sputter, "Get to the point." This economy of words can be both troubling and reassuring. A friend of mine recently asked her director husband why he rarely said, "I love you." He replied, "Sweetheart, I said that last month, and nothing's changed." Tough-minded, decisive, exacting, and skeptical. In conjunction with their analytical, focused, and direct approach, directors are pragmatic. Respect for hallowed ways and social or political correctness irritate directors. If they are forced to observe a tradition that makes no sense to them, they do it, grudgingly. Where explorers are generous, builders stoical, and negotiators altruistic, directors are practical. These paragons of expediency are also decisive, a trait associated directly with testosterone, as one sex-change patient noticed. After 3 months of testosterone injections to convert himself from a woman into a man, he mused, "I act faster." In my personality type study, directors stood out from the other types when they agreed with the statement, "I have no trouble making a choice, even when several alternatives seem equally good at first." Builders are slow to make important decisions because they are cautious and meticulous. Negotiators tend to ruminate because they see so many alternative solutions and want to imagine all of them. Explorers are somewhat faster in making decisions because they are impulsive. But my personality type studies showed that directors are far more likely to make decisions quickly, even more likely than explorers, perhaps because directors are also so tough-minded. Only directors strongly agreed with the statement, "I am tough-minded." "Action is eloquence," Shakespeare wrote. Directors agree. I know a director who bought an expensive car in 20 minutes, and he wasn't rich. Yet directors are skeptical, and this distrusting nature is associated with a strong derivative of testosterone, dihydrotestosterone. Directors seem to follow the advice of the English prelate Thomas Fuller, "Trust thyself only, and another shall not betray thee." The only things that directors truly believe in are reasoning, logic, and systematic investigation. Directors are even suspicious of facts until they have personally checked them out. As for motives, these they must carefully analyze. The epitome of the skeptical director was Metternich, the 19th century Australian statesman. When he was informed that the Tsar of Russia had died, he is said to have muttered, "What could he have meant by that?" Resourceful, self-confident, and bold. Directors can be ingenious at solving problems. Resourcefulness is as important to them as adventure is to the explorer, loyalty is to the builder, and empathy is to the negotiator. Einstein certainly was resourceful in getting his first wife, Mileva Maric, to divorce him. He had fallen wildly in love with this dark-haired Serbian math student soon after he met her in his college physics class. First they had a daughter, then they married, and had 2 sons. Deeply they loved. Intensely they discussed ideas. Meticulously she checked the math and logic in his school papers. But with time, they grew apart. And to extricate himself from their marriage, Einstein made a bargain with her. If she would give him a divorce, he would someday win a Nobel Prize and give her the prize money. 17 years later, she collected. Einstein was self-confident and bold, like many directors. As long as directors know the essential facts and are satisfied with the reasoning behind the plan, they feel secure. Then they act boldly. Another bold director was Martin Luther, the father of the German Protestant Reformation in the 16th century, who publicly attacked the corruption of the Roman Catholic Church. Luther defiantly stated, "Here I stand, I cannot do otherwise. God help me, Amen." Like Einstein, Luther would change the course of history with self-confidence and boldness. Confidence and daring. These traits arise, at least in part, from the activities of testosterone. Menopausal women provide good examples. With menopause, levels of estrogen decline, unmasking natural levels of testosterone. And around the world, middle-aged women become more action-oriented, confident, forthright, and bold. All these traits have been associated with testosterone. An old-school buddy of mine must be a director. As founding president of a merchant bank, he lends money to other banks, as well as to enormously wealthy businessmen. One evening, he went to a fancy dinner in New York to negotiate the sale of a sizable piece of New York real estate in the heart of Midtown. By dessert, he had completed the deal with the man sitting on his left. Instantly, he felt bored. So in a New York minute, as he told me, he turned to the man on his right and started his next big business deal. He was smooth, persuasive, and bold. Autonomous and competitive. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Poet William Ernest Henley expressed another facet of the director, a fiercely independent spirit. Directors can tolerate extreme isolation, long hours at the desk, and many other discomforts when they work. But they must pursue their goals and solve their problems on their own. Directors demand autonomy, another trait tied to testosterone priming in the womb. Einstein was highly independent. In a letter to a friend, he wrote, "A foolish faith in authority is the worst enemy of truth." And to a lover he remarked, "Long live impudence. It is my guardian angel in this world." Directors have almost no respect for diplomas, references, or credentials either. Perhaps this is why Bill Gates dropped out of Harvard in 1975 during his junior year. In his mind, he had something better to do than collect a bachelor's degree from this revered institution, design innovative software, and launch Microsoft. Like Einstein, Gates despises anything that smacks of authority or rules. Gates has worked for himself all his life. His independent approach has worked, too. Gates became a multimillionaire at age 31. He was knighted by Queen Elizabeth at age 50, and he has transformed modern society with his systemizing and independent brain. Coupled with this hunger for autonomy and independence, the director is competitive and aggressive. Explorers, builders, directors, and negotiators probably exhibit no real difference in internal competitiveness, the desire to meet personal goals and display excellence. But high testosterone men and women score higher on external competitiveness, the willingness to elbow others aside to win. In my personality type study, directors were distinctly more likely than other types to strongly agree with the statement, "I enjoy competitive conversations." They were also more positive in their agreement with the statement, "Debating is a good way to match my wits with others." A journalist offered me a fine example of this trait one evening after I'd made a speech. He came up to the podium and told me that he and his wife played golf. They often played with 3 other couples in a jovial, relaxed manner. But one morning they switched the ground rules. The 4 women played together, as did the men. After the match, his wife recounted how she and her girlfriends had skipped the 14th hole, and how one woman moved her ball out of the rough to take a better shot. No one cared, she said. Her journalist husband wagged his head and told me about his morning with the boys. Their game had turned into cutthroat golf. The association between testosterone and aggressiveness is well established. For centuries, farmers have castrated bulls and roosters to curb their aggressive nature. And reams of data link aggressiveness with testosterone in both men and women. Aggressiveness has long been celebrated, too. The classical Greeks believed that Ares, the god of war, gave men the ferocity to kill lions, slay dragons, fight enemies, and protect their homes. And the Romans dressed Mars in shining armor, invincible and magnificent. The message? Aggression wins. But why must directors win with such determination? If you ask them, they are likely to give you a host of practical reasons. But from the evolutionary perspective, this competitive striving gives directors something they seek: rank. Big men, dominance matching. Around the world, men and women who are exposed to more testosterone, either in the womb or as they age, tend to compete more aggressively for rank. This is particularly evident in the office. During business meetings, high testosterone men are likely to break a silence to seize the floor, then deliver a take-charge speech. They often attack with words, and they take co-workers more seriously when they argue back. As a colleague speaks louder, they do too, triggering a spiral of dominance matching that sometimes ends in a shouting match. I experienced this phenomenon one evening in New York. I was attending an event and standing with 4 men, one of whom began to bludgeon me with words. He was enjoying his snide remarks. The other 3 looked on as I curled my shoulders, hung my head, and smiled deferentially in hopes of stopping this onslaught. But he was unstoppable. On he railed. Suddenly, something snapped in my head, and I heard myself deliver a vicious retort. I've forgotten what it was, but I remember it was not only stinging, but funny. Immediately, all 5 of us stiffened and grinned, lips drawn back, teeth clenched in the primate nervous social smile. A sickening silence ensued. And as I stood there, waiting for his reply, several thoughts tore through my mind. Would he hate me forever for embarrassing him in front of his friends? Or would he respect me for matching his attempt at dominance? Suddenly he threw up his arms, laughed, and hugged me. He's liked me ever since. Nature isn't tidy. There's no simple correlation between testosterone and status. Too much testosterone, for example, is often associated with low rank. Moreover, this hormone never works alone. As mentioned earlier, builders who have specific activity in certain serotonin pathways achieve higher ranks. And serotonin and testosterone often suppress each other. So it's not surprising that high-ranking professional men tend to have somewhat lower levels of testosterone than do blue-collar and unemployed men. In short, bodily testosterone needs to be at a specific level in relation to various other chemicals to correlate with rank. Nevertheless, high testosterone men tend to strive for rank. Why? Because women like high-ranking men, or what anthropologists call big men. Zulus, Aleut Eskimos, Mbuti Pygmies, Americans, women everywhere like to have a man's resources as they rear their young. Even female mice, deer, and bighorn sheep find high-ranking males more attractive. So high-ranking men win sexual and reproductive opportunities and more children, the evolutionary payoff for their competitive spirit. Women who experience high levels of testosterone in the womb are more likely to pursue male-dominated occupations and achieve higher status jobs. But they are less likely to marry, and they have fewer children. So why, from an evolutionary perspective, do they strive to get ahead? Perhaps their ambitious nature evolved, in part, to help their biological relatives survive, thereby unconsciously passing on some of their own DNA. Achievement and knowledge. Regardless of the evolutionary payoffs, directors yearn to succeed. They work hard and long, and they set high standards for themselves. As Winston Churchill put it, I'm easily satisfied with the very best. But directors rarely feel that they have expended enough time and energy on their projects. And because many set their standards higher and higher, they become more and more tense, worrying that this time they will surely fail. Some directors live in an almost constant sense of impending doom. This need to achieve even permeates their leisure hours. They want to lift heavier weights, jog faster, or play a better hand of poker. And when they disappoint themselves, they can be very self-critical. One of my friends recounted to me how she, as a child, used to hear her father as he sat in the bathtub muttering to himself, "Daddy's stupid, Daddy's stupid, Daddy's stupid." Directors can be ruthless on themselves. Yet they never give up striving, and many strive for one of life's highest prizes, knowledge. In my personality type study, only directors strongly agreed with this statement: I pursue intellectual topics thoroughly and regularly. Like explorers, directors need to know. But unlike explorers, who have a wide range of interests, directors focus their knowledge. In my personality type study, directors were the most likely to have a doctoral degree. And directors spend their spare time with those who share their thirst for knowledge. Only directors reported that they socialized largely with intellectuals. Moreover, in my word type study, the words directors used most often when describing what they were looking for in a partner were intelligent and intelligence. A few great friends. One thing directors don't seek, however, is a wide circle of friends. Einstein was always a loner, even as a child. Every Thursday for several years, for example, his parents invited a poor student, Max Talmud, to share their dinner. This weekly event began when Max was 21 and Albert was 10. Years later, Max recalled, "In all those years, I never saw him reading any light literature, nor did I ever see him in the company of schoolmates or other boys his age." Testosterone correlates negatively with socialization. Infants exposed to higher levels of testosterone in the womb make less eye contact and have a smaller vocabulary. By age 4, they also show less social savvy and begin to develop fewer, yet deeper, interests. Be it the naval battles of World War II, the life of Michelangelo, the evolution of mammals, or the latest strategies in chess, directors need to know every last detail about their particular field of interest. And they don't suffer fools gladly. Directors want to have intense discussions with a few close friends or people with whom they can share ideas. What did young Einstein talk about at the dinner table with Max Talmud? Science. Nevertheless, directors can be charming, if they are interested in the conversation. Negotiators are particularly fond of the forthright and knowledge-packed conversations they have with directors. I certainly am. Like many negotiators, my secondary type, I tend to see too many hidden meanings, innuendos, and complexities in almost any social exchange, so I find directors relaxing. I feel I can count on them to say what they mean. Moreover, they don't tend to exaggerate like the flamboyant explorer. They don't judge like the moralistic builder, and they aren't manipulative like the subtle negotiator. Most important to me, what directors talk about can be richly informative. But if you want to communicate with directors, ask them what they think, not how they feel. Directors don't talk easily about their feelings. Emotional containment, the right stuff. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs. So begins Rudyard Kipling's famous poem, If. Directors fear losing their heads. They admire emotional control. To them, objectivity is essential. They feel it is imperative to be detached from their feelings, particularly when they make decisions. So directors aspire to be calm, cool, and collected. In fact, Einstein was hailed by journalists as the embodiment of pure intellect because his reasoning so completely trumped his inner emotional world. Some of the men and the women who have taken the Myers-Briggs personality test have shown this trait in spades. These individuals, whom Myers calls the thinking type, value logic more than sentiment. They seek to be just, objective, analytical, and convincing. They believe it is a higher compliment to be called a consistently reasonable person than a person of real feeling. They would rather be regarded as competent than compassionate. And when making a decision, these men and women believe it is more important to weigh the facts than to consider people's feelings and opinions. The directors in my personality type study share this perspective. When asked to respond to the statement, "I am able to solve problems without letting emotions get in the way," directors were far more likely than other types to strongly agree. Directors also believe, as Goethe wrote, it is in self-limitation that a master first shows himself. Unlike the explorer, who can enjoy being out of control, the director regards loss of self-control as weakness. Testosterone is associated with this emotional containment. As levels of testosterone increase in teenage boys, many begin to mask their feelings of vulnerability, loneliness, anxiety, and guilt. High testosterone men and women smile less and employ less eye contact. Those with the right stuff, as author Tom Wolfe called it, even develop the ability to contain feelings of intense fear and severe pain. Heroic altruism. Perhaps it is, in part, this self-containment that enables directors to express an outstanding human trait, heroic altruism. Individuals with high levels of testosterone are more likely than other types to dash into a burning building to save a stranger, attack an armed bully with nothing but their fists, or brave a hurricane or tornado to save an abandoned dog. And when asked what prompted them to perform their act of courage, these heroes often say they were barely thinking. "I did what I had to do," they say. "It wasn't a conscious choice." These directors are being honest, as directors often are. Their brains are most likely flooded with testosterone, giving them strength, focus, decisiveness, and resolve, driving them to act quickly and boldly. Other personality types can be altruistic too, of course. I suspect many explorers share this heroic impulse because they are so spontaneous and energetic. Builders are cautious, however. Some can be extremely brave, but I suspect that these men and women are less likely to run into a burning building without thinking through the consequences step by step. Negotiators are compassionate. Many work long and hard to contribute to world peace, educate the poor, or perform other altruistic acts. But with their contextual view of life, negotiators are more likely to stand outside the burning building, weighing the alternatives of risking their lives to save a stranger versus their responsibilities to their own family, children, and community. I suspect that most of the firefighters, police officers, and other men and women who put themselves in harm's way every day are high testosterone directors. On the dark side, negative traits of the director. The keenest sorrow is to recognize ourselves as the sole cause of all our adversities, wrote Sophocles. Indeed, we bring many of our troubles upon ourselves. Take the director's emotional containment. There's a flip side to this propensity, emotional flooding. Despite their earnest efforts at self-control, high testosterone men and women tend to have trouble containing their emotions. Directors are particularly susceptible to anger, exploding into a generalized rage when they feel hurt, disappointed, or frustrated. In short, they lose it. A pounding heart, tense muscles, sweating, shallow breathing, skyrocketing blood pressure, a burst of adrenaline and the stress hormones, the director's entire body gets ready to fight or flee. Many lash out, too, scowling, screaming, even hitting. They can become swamped by what poet T.S. Eliot called undisciplined squads of emotion. Einstein suffered from emotional flooding, particularly during his childhood. His sister Maya described his fury. At such moments, his face would turn completely yellow, the tip of his nose snow-white, and he was no longer in control of himself. Once he threw a chair at a tutor who fled and never returned. He must have hurled more than a few household items at his adoring sister, too, because Maya later wrote, "It takes a sound skull to be the sister of an intellectual." Directors are forthright, a fine trait when it's appropriate. But they can become blunt and abrasive. Because they're exacting, directors can become uncompromising and demanding. Their ambition can lead them into workaholism. With their narrow focus, some directors can miss the broader implications of their actions and behavior, trampling others. Their need for rank and recognition turns some into aggressive bullies and power mongers. And because directors value autonomy so highly, they can shun emotional connections with those who love them. Possible physical problems. Directors may be more susceptible to certain ailments and diseases, too. Fetal testosterone can overprime the brain, and as this chemical enhances growth in the brain's right hemisphere to produce superior spatial abilities, it can retard growth in some of the language centers in the left hemisphere, predisposing directors to dyslexia, stuttering, and other tics of language fluency. Einstein, for example, didn't speak until almost age 3. As his sister said, he had such difficulty with language that those around him feared he would never learn. Individuals with a great deal of fetal testosterone also tend to be less skilled at recognizing emotions and less sensitive to the feelings of others. Affiliated with mind blindness, these people aren't able to judge what others are thinking or feeling. They can lack empathy, too, and become aloof and impersonal, even cold. In fact, Galen called these men and women phlegmatic, largely because they were often distant and detached. Moreover, scientists believe that an extreme overload of prenatal testosterone can contribute to autism and related syndromes. Severely autistic boys and girls make little or no eye contact with others, nor do they express compassion or even the slightest awareness of the feelings of others. Yet autistic individuals sometimes have a special and dramatically developed systemizing skill, such as knowing in an instant what day of the week it was on May 17th, 1184. Shooting for the stars. Despite these possible problems, most directors remain healthy and have many wonderful traits. With their gift for logic and reasoning, they can ignore the quotidian demands of life and concentrate on its challenges and mysteries. And with their bold spirit and penetrating focus, directors can become intellectual geniuses, fine sportsmen, and exciting friends and lovers. As Einstein said on his deathbed, "It's time to go. I will do it elegantly." He had high standards to the end. Semper ad astra, always to the stars. I have often gazed at this inscription on my mother's family crest and wondered who chose this motto in 16th century Holland. It was surely a director, for it captures the heart and soul of these men and women. Directors shoot for the stars.